Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and so thrilled today to be joined by today's guest, Daniella Pineda, to talk all about Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. And I know that when you were preparing for this role, that part of that was not just watching the anime series, the original, but really studying it and thinking about what are the aspects that I want to carry over into my iteration of this character, what are some of the things that were touched upon in the anime that you wanted to expand upon, but also what are some of the things to kind of leave behind, because at the end of the day, this is its own iteration of this character as well. And so I was really interested in some of the details that you shaped from that specific research, but also some of the details that you saw that maybe didn't pass over for you as well.
Yeah, you know, I didn't want to create something, it was very apparent at the beginning of our show, looking at where production was headed, was that they were going to try to create as much of a close replica of the show aesthetically. And I wanted to have, blueprints or flourishes of the original character and the original anime, but I wasn't interested in doing a shot for shot, because it just doesn't translate into live action. And also because I saw where my show was going, was like, I wanted to offset it a little bit just to kind of give it a little more dimension. So I watched the anime a ton, and, rather than, doing what I said or I was trying to avoid, I would find moments where that were, indistinctively like Faye. So there's like a scene where every time she eats food, she eats it like ravishes, and it just like gets all over her face, and she's just like a raccoon going through a trash can. And so I was like, oh, that's a very Faye characteristic. So how do I take a moment like that and kind of expand upon it, because she is a little feral. Um, and and so, those were sort of beats that I was trying to kind of pull out. As far as things that were left in the anime that I wasn't able to, bring, I mean, obviously I'm at the mercy of the writers. So a lot of those decisions aren't even necessarily up to me. I know a lot of people had comments about her outfit, and they're like, her outfit's different. And it's like, yes, her outfit is different, because I can't be in a tiny thong bikini for 14-hour shoot days, 5 days a week. So we have to make adjustments. And so we did. But I feel like there were parts of her sexual prowess and parts of her in the anime that was a little heavier, that was like less so in our show. But I also think that our producers were more interested in her as a character, and her as a survivor, and the essence of that character, as opposed to those other elements. But also I say that season one, their future seasons to kind of, flesh out more of those aspects.
And when it came to creating her as a character and doing a lot of your character development process before filming, were there unique aspects to that journey with her as a character, because you're playing someone who doesn't remember the majority of her experiences, but yet there is also that fact that she has had experiences that feed into who she is, even if she doesn't remember the specific details. And so how did that uniquely inform the way that you were thinking about her history and her backstory and certain choices for her as a character?
Yeah. I she's someone who is very in the moment, and was someone who, by no want of their own, was sort of forced out of a moving car and then told to run. But in her core, she's not a bad person. And I think that's because she finds out, oh, I was loved. I had a loving upbringing. I had stability. And I think that that is her essence. And then everything else is sort of like, how do I just get from minute to minute? So, knowing that her essence is good, she's not a bad guy, even though she does a lot of shitty things. It was more like, how are you someone who's kind of like seeing things for the first time, or tasting things for the first time, or interpreting things for the first time? And so she's really immature. She has an immaturity that I think is a youthful quality that propels her forward. But also she's a little stunted developmentally. Um, and so kind of like finding whatever it is that was, being slightly adolescent at times. Yeah, somewhere in that zone.
And with all those things, you were mentioning certain things that she's doing for the first time or that she doesn't remember that she's done before, even the moment where she sees a dog and isn't sure what it is at first. Did you find that when you were filming, you were constantly stepping back and just thinking about her very specific worldview? What would she know? What would she not know and not remember and would think was a new experience or be uncertain of in a different way because of that?
Um, that's a good question. You know, like for instance, like Spike and Jet. I mean, Spike is like dealing with this past and always sort of like shrouded in secrecy and shrouded in a little depression. And she doesn't really have those things. I don't know if Faye does a terrible amount of introspection. I think she kind of like flounders through and needs to get what she wants. So there wasn't like a moment to have a memory to pause from. There's like searching, but nothing really concrete to pull from. So I think I tried to kind of keep, and that's, you don't do that with all characters that you portray. But I think with that one, it was very everything in the moment.
Yeah. And she's also a character who has built so many defense mechanisms around her and so many guardrails to getting close to people, but out of such necessity through what she's been through. And then within that, we get to see the spaces where she allows that to gradually come down a little bit as she starts to trust other people. And so what was that journey like for you with her as a character in building up those defense mechanisms, but then finding the cracks within it and the softness coming through bit by bit for her a little bit more?
Yeah. There's like a scene where they're all on the ship, Spike, Jet, and Faye, and Jet finds out, oh, Faye's lied to us, and we should just kick her off the ship. Like, she lied, she betrayed my trust. And Faye has remorse and she has regret because she cares for these people now, and she cares for them, and she doesn't want to break up whatever this new family is that's forming. And I think it's it's just like anyone. She wears like a protective cloak, whether that's like in the form of humor, or being sarcastic, or she pushes people away. But I think that our show did do a good job of finding the incremental moments of slowly softening. There's her and the mechanic where she's sort of exploring her sexuality, because again, it's something that she doesn't know. So yeah, I think it wasn't I didn't have to do much. That was like, that part was written, her slowly kind of softening. It'll be interesting to see where they go come season 2, because does that softening harden up again? I don't know.
Yeah. And you were mentioning her sense of humor, which again is one of her very clear defense mechanisms. And so what was it like for you in terms of figuring out and finding her comedic tonality and voice as a character, knowing that it stems from a very specific place for her as well?
Yeah. It was quite easy. I think part of that was casting. I read the part and it was like, oh, this so kind of sounds like my own voice. It's so similar. Like, I didn't have to reach very far. And so comedy it's a defense mechanism for her, and humor is a safety net and defense mechanism to make sure people don't get too close. But also I feel like it's just sort of inherent in her personality. And every scene, I would go through the script and I would look for, where is there a moment where I can improvise something? Where is there a moment where I could just make it a little funnier if I can? And I tried to push that as much as I could. And I don't know. It was a combination of something that was already written, but also something that was very, very important to me from scene to scene. Not appropriate for every scene, but where I could, it was really important to try to add as much, because she's just inherently that girl.
And one of the things that's so enjoyable with the show as a whole, and in particular with your character, is the way that it dances tonally between really heightened situations that it's leaning into for the narrative of the show, and then the more grounded character moments as well. And did you find it quite seamless playing between those two different styles of approach and performance for your character? Or was that something that very much came through in the scripts in terms of which direction to take your performance in at different points?
Um, I feel like at times, navigating tonally the grandness and the large scale, vibe of the show, coupled with being a human and being real. Um, I will admit there were moments where I was like, when it was more grounded, I was like, okay, this feels good as an actor, but does this work? Our show has an element of camp to it. And so at times it was a little confusing. Like, is this going to register? Or when it was too camp and too grand and too big, it's like, are we is it overacting? Is this too much? I think if anything, a lot of the actors fought for things to be more grounded, at times, because we needed a balance. Otherwise, I feel like people, viewers aren't going to feel as connected or have as much empathy for characters that are more a caricature than a human. So I think it was really important for all of us, and definitely for myself, to try to like find that delicate balance of the two.
And then I also wanted to talk about the incredible training that you did for all of the action sequences throughout the series, because it's both a mix of hand to hand combat and weaponry. And so, were you training in a really broad cross section of different styles of stunt work with the team that you were working with for that? Because you were working with the team that did all of Keanu Reeves and all of the John Wick movies, who are
Yeah.
obviously, so incredibly skilled at so many different facets of what that looks like.
Yeah. So for part of the time, we worked with 8711, the 8711 stunt team out of Los Angeles. And it's funny because I went through three sections of training. The first section of training was literally to get in shape to train. Anyone who thinks that they can just jump into like mixed martial arts having no background are totally batshit. It's like, I don't know, there's like a joke or something in the ether of like, you have to like work out just to like go to that gym. Like, you got to start at this gym. You got to start at like, Plant Fitness, and then you go to Equinox or whatever the hell that is. It's kind of like the same thing. Like, I had to just get fit again. And then I just did basic martial arts, kind of like waking up your body kind of stuff. I went through a really kind of slow period of adaptation, which was great for me and great for anyone who's looking to immerse themselves in something crazy, like, intense martial arts and everything else. And then the third phase was, once we got to New Zealand, Al Poppleton put us through a boot camp that we went through for about 2 months. And that was everything from sword work to footwork to body awareness to like lungs, lungs training to tumbling and rolls and kicks. And that by the end of the day, I was so dead. And then we would go into rehearsals, and it would be like, you got to be on. So it was like a lot. And I will say, of any shoot that I've ever worked on, this by far was the most involved project. Like, we all worked really, really, really hard. It's funny because now I go on Netflix and I'm like, oh, that's just the thing that we did. But I know everything that was involved to make it. And it was like, I mean, John's been working for, super long time. And John was like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, it was like really, really tough, but ultimately very, very rewarding. And now I know I can do it and survive and not die. So that's great.
Yeah. And especially because you were doing so many moments which included a lot of like tumbles and rolls and very close combat. That was the genesis of certain choices when it came to your character's costume as well, to have that functionality where you could have pads where you needed them in certain places. What was the point where everybody realized that the costume really needed to fit in with the movement that you needed for your performance, and to be able to be a costume that could have those elements and have that padding for you?
Yeah. Well, we initially tried the original costume, which is essentially a bikini with like a G-string or like, a garter belt. Um, and, you know, it was one thing to like, okay, if I'm in stunt training, I'm in the gym and I'm doing a tumble, I'm like wearing long sleeves and like sweats or leggings. Now imagine me with a tiny, tiny short shorts doing like a tumble. Like it's partially going to look a little ridiculous and be a little distracting at times. But also it was like, I can't hide anything. I can't hide anything in this. What am I going to be able to live in for long periods of time? And Jane Holland, who was the head costumer, our head of wardrobe, we looked at a lot of pictures. I told her I wanted to pull from like Beyonce and J Lo and a lot of these women who do these concerts where they show off their figure and the costume really accentuates the look, but also hides everything and tightens it up. And so it was like the stockings and the short shorts and the layers of stockings. And so really it was like pulling from like female pop stars who have to do a lot of like rigorous physical work on stage. And then how do we kind of put that in a Faye, with a Faye twist?
Yeah. And with the training that you did for the show, you didn't just go through that once, but in essence, you had to then retrain for the show because you started shooting, and then there was John's injury, which paused production, and then there was COVID. And when you were coming back into it and retraining, was it at least helpful having an idea of what you were stepping back into, some of the basic skills that you were going to need as you were re entering that space again?
Yeah, it was more dreadful than anything because it sucked. Because the first time around in 2019, when we got to New Zealand, by the time we started in August, and I was like fit. I was fitter than I have ever been in my life. Everything was tight and taut, and I worked so hard, and it was great. Then fucking COVID happened. And for months, I'm in my house eating ramen, eating noodles, eating toast, breakfast burritos, watching my favorite programs. And it was like I screwed myself. I should have just been working out that whole time, but no, I wanted to be a human. And so coming back that second time around, I had all this, shall I say, I had my Christmas weight, and not knocking the weight. But I've got to get back into that costume. So that was tough. It was like, oh no, and also I had to shoot Jurassic World right before I shot Bebop. So I didn't have time to like really set like that rigorous training every day. And so, yeah, coming back around, that was tough because I knew what was going to be involved, and I felt a little more vulnerable because I didn't have, that support that I did. And also psychologically coming back into that second round, it was weird. It was like, oh, okay, I know what's up. I know what's going on. But also like, oh man, I felt so much more kind of prepared in a different zone the first time around. I think COVID just really took everybody's head in.
And then I
Yeah.
also wanted to talk about the bebop of Cowboy Bebop because it sounds like having bebop music and even just imagery of it around when you were doing a lot of the stunt training as well was just kind of seeped into every facet of production. And I was interested in the space that helped you find, either just for your character or stepping into scenes with just having that constant connection to that style of music.
Yeah. Well, I love jazz, and I'm a big jazz head. Also my brother is a musician, went to Berklee School of Music. So we've always talked music, and we've always talked jazz in particular. So that was already kind of my sweet spot. And Alex Garcia Lopez, one of our directors, would always play jazz on set. And also the bebop is littered with jazz albums, jazz references. My earrings are from the cover of My Funny Valentine from like the 50s. John's got sheet music at the bottom of his shoe. So jazz was always ever present. So I don't know how much like necessarily the music influenced our acting, but it definitely was exciting to know, oh, when we're done with this performance, it's going to be so cool to know that the work that we're doing is going to be coupled with a jazz score, and like, what is that going to even look like, so that was really cool.
Yeah. And jumping back to some of the emotional moments that you're filming within the show, I wanted to ask you about something that you did in revisiting a certain scene from the anime where Faye's kind of watching and listening to a video of herself from when she was a child and finding that to be something that was really useful to you to listen to right before you would film some of the more emotional scenes. And what was the moment that you realized that that specific scene and that specific audio really helped you to step into a certain space for her as a character?
um i I watched that scene maybe twice, the one in the anime, and then I wanted to keep it very fresh in my head. And on the day um they played the audio to to play against in the scene, and I have to say, like, it genuinely made me very, very sad. Also, it helps that both in the anime and in our show there's like a score that's to it that is also tonally sort of her where she is in her emotional journey at that time. um and it was just not hard. It was not hard to be sad. I think the most heartbreaking moment or realization for Faye is that knowing at one point that she was very loved, and someone loved her and someone nurtured her and took care of her, and now that person is long gone. They're probably dead, and now she doesn't have anyone, and all she's ever known is like pulling mud to like get out of a ditch. And yet, where this other like loving warm place is kind of gone, and I think that for her is like the most heartbreaking part. So the whole thing is sad. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't tough to get there.
Yeah. And then as well as acting within the industry, I know that writing, directing, and producing is all really important to you as well. And actually writing and producing being very much how you first were coming into the industry before you ended up deciding to step into acting. And that you've also been working on a feature that you plan to write, direct, and produce as well. But I loved something that you said about all of that, in that part of the excitement of working on a project like that isn't just what it creates for yourself, but that it's about having aspirations to find the next voices within the industry and to help kind of elevate other people around you. And so just wanted to ask about the way in which for you, it's not only about having a cross section of aspirations within the industry, but really thinking about the impact and the position that that gives you to afford to other people around you within the entertainment industry as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know how important it was for me to meet those people who gave me a shot and gave me a chance and saw, oh, she has something, she has a voice. And, I am interested in having a very long-term relationship with entertainment. And, part of that is not just about me, 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 me. I feel like sometimes, being an actor is very much just sort of one small sliver of this pie. And sometimes the whole like me, me, me of it all, I get a little, it doesn't have to be about me all the time. There are a lot of really, really talented, wonderful people who have really good stories, who are better actors, better directors, better everything, and I am very interested in and working with those people. And I would love to be in a position where I could discover, I mean, also the idea of like discovering somebody, who, my manager found me, thank God, and changed the rest of my life. I'd like to say that it was me, but really, so much of it was her. And so I would love to, to be that person for somebody else, and also maybe, look after people who are, similar to me or similar minded. For instance, like, I've said this before, but I'm always very, very surprised of what little content there is made for Latinos in the US, especially in California. Like, I can't tell you how crazy it drives me to watch a period piece from the 70s or 60s and there's not a single fucking Mexican in the whole movie. And I'm just like, is that California? Like, what is this? It's so selective. So, I just want to be able to be the person that allows those types of voices and those types of stories to get made.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And it makes me excited not just to see everything else that you continue to do as an actor, but also the other stories that you're going to tell and the potential voices that will get the opportunity to experience within the industry because of the work that you do. So thank you so much for sharing everything about Cowboy Bebop. Really appreciate it, Daniela.
Thank you so much. Lovely speaking with you.